I hadn't even changed out of my funeral suit when I pulled into the long gravel driveway of my grandfather's ranch. The house stood the way I remembered it as a child, wide porch, creaking swing, and the smell of pine carried by the late afternoon wind. Inside, the old leather chair where my grandfather used to sit still held the faint shape of his presence. The air carried the weight of history, 150 years of sweat, laughter, and heartbreak soaked into these walls. The lawyer had left only an hour before, his words still echoing in my head. Everything was mine now, the house, the cattle, the oak tree planted by my great-great-grandfather, and the small family cemetery that lay quiet in the west pasture. It was an inheritance built on 6 generations of hard work. For most people, it would have been overwhelming. For me, it felt sacred. My grandfather didn't just leave me property. He left me responsibility. As I walked the hallway lined with old photographs, I felt the pull of his legacy. His voice seemed to whisper through the wooden beams, "Protect this land, no matter the cost." I just didn't realize how quickly that vow would be tested. I hadn't even unpacked when I heard footsteps on the porch. A sharp knock, then without waiting for an answer, the front door swung open. A woman in her 50s marched inside like she owned the place. Clipboard in one hand, pinched lips, eyes scanning the room with the disapproval of a health inspector. "You can't just inherit land and do whatever you want with it," she barked, planting her feet on the rug where my grandfather's boots once rested. For a second, I thought the grief was making me hallucinate. Who storms into someone's home on the very day they bury their grandfather? But she wasn't a ghost. She was real. And she was furious. "Excuse me?" I managed, still stunned. "Mr. Grant, I'm Olivia Sharp, president of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association," she announced, like she was royalty unveiling her title. Without asking, she sat down in my grandfather's chair. "I'm here to discuss violations on your property that require immediate attention." Violations. On my ranch. A ranch that had been in my family since before her subdivision even existed. She flipped through her papers. "First, that porch swing has to go. Our architectural guidelines prohibit outdoor furniture visible from the street. Second, the oak tree by your gate must be trimmed to meet sightline standards. Third," and here her voice rose in absolute authority, "the cemetery in your west pasture must be relocated to an approved municipal facility within 60 days. My heart stopped. She wanted me to dig up my ancestors. I stared at her, stunned, before leaning back and letting a slow smile cross my face. "Maybe I should mention something," I said. "I'm not just Mr. Grant. I'm Governor Grant. You might have seen me on the news." For the first time, her eyes flickered. But the pause lasted only a second before she pressed on, utterly convinced of her power. "Governor or not, you're subject to the same rules as everyone else in this community." I rose from the chair and walked to my grandfather's desk. The deed, survey maps, and heritage protection documents lay neatly stacked. I spread them across the wood for her to see. "This land has been protected since 1875. It doesn't fall under your subdivision's authority." She barely glanced at them before sniffing. "Community guidelines override individual claims." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with arrogance. I was dealing with someone who believed her clipboard outweighed state law. I escorted her out, memorizing her license plate as she drove away. Through the window, I saw her sit in her car for nearly 15 minutes, furiously calling someone. It was clear, this wasn't over. The next morning, my phone buzzed with alerts. The motion sensors along the west fence were triggered. I grabbed my grandfather's binoculars and peered out the kitchen window. 2 men in coveralls were cutting through the barbed wire, dismantling posts with practiced precision. They weren't vandals. They were professionals. My security system captured everything: wide-angle shots, crystal-clear audio, GPS timestamps. The men worked quickly, one checking his phone, the other stacking wire neatly. Their truck bore magnetic signs that read Meadowbrook Property Services. Moments later, a text arrived from Olivia's number: "Property correction crew working today. Do not interfere." I laughed out loud. She was documenting her crimes in writing. I forwarded the footage to my attorney and blind copied a journalist I trusted. Then I sat back and let the cameras roll. If she wanted to hang herself with evidence, I'd give her all the rope she needed. By noon, nearly 400 feet of fencing was gone. The men spoke openly, their words caught on the microphones. She said, "Focus near the old cemetery first," one muttered. My stomach turned. She was targeting my family's graves. That evening, neighbors began stopping by. A woman named Ella told me Olivia had tried to fine her for growing tomatoes. Another man said she threatened him over flower boxes. A veteran whispered that she ordered him to remove his American flag for aesthetic inconsistency. It wasn't just me. She'd been running the HOA like a dictatorship. Ella organized a meeting at her house. When I arrived, 30 cars lined the street. Inside, neighbors piled documents on the table: fake fees, unauthorized assessments, violation letters citing rules that didn't exist. Olivia had stolen tens of thousands from the community. By the end of the night, they voted unanimously to demand her resignation. But I knew she wouldn't go quietly. 2 days later, I hosted a small memorial for my grandfather near the family cemetery. The air was still, the oak tree casting long shadows. Friends and neighbors gathered to honor his legacy. That's when Olivia showed up. She pulled up in a rental truck, 3 men with her, unloading survey stakes and measuring tools. "Governor Grant," she called loudly, "I'm here to conduct a compliance inspection under state authority." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A retired judge stepped forward, his voice shaking with outrage. "That's criminal impersonation of a government official." Olivia ignored him, jabbing stakes into my land. She marched toward the memorial bench, kicking aside lilies, and stabbed her flagpole into the ground beside my grandfather's name. "This is HOA property now," she declared. My patience snapped. I stepped between her and the bench, phone raised, live streaming. "Say that again for the court," I told her. She tried to shove past me, claiming enforcement rights. Guests recorded every second as she attempted to desecrate my grandfather's memorial. Police sirens wailed in the distance, and within minutes, deputies swarmed the scene. Olivia was handcuffed, still screaming about community compliance. Her crew was detained. As she was led away, she smirked and hissed, "You'll see me at the reassessment hearing." The community was done with her. At the next meeting, residents packed the hall. The state attorney presented evidence: security footage, texts, bank records. Olivia had embezzled nearly $100,000, staged property sabotage, and conspired with a developer to force the ranch's sale for pennies. One by one, neighbors testified. 17 families harassed. Dozens fined illegally. Money stolen. Flags banned. Gardens destroyed. When the trial came, the jury needed less than 2 hours. Olivia was convicted of conspiracy, fraud, harassment, assault, impersonating authority, and violating restraining orders. The judge sentenced her to 2 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, restitution payments, and a lifetime ban from HOA leadership. The developer who worked with her lost his license, his business crumbled, and civil lawsuits buried him in debt. As for the community, they rebuilt. Ella was elected as interim coordinator, promising transparency and fairness. Stolen funds were recovered, fake rules erased, and residents finally felt free again. The ranch itself received permanent protection as a state heritage site. The cemetery was legally designated untouchable. The oak tree was preserved for future generations. My grandfather's bench bore a plaque, "For Harold Grant, who believed land is legacy." That autumn, we held a true memorial with 200 guests. State officials unveiled the historic marker. Neighbors stood together, united not by fear but by resilience. As the sun set, I sat on the bench, looking across the fields. The fences stood strong, the cattle grazed peacefully, and justice had been served. My grandfather had always told me, good fences make good neighbors. He never warned me about bad ones, but he gave me everything I needed to defeat them. Now his ranch would stand forever, safe from corruption, safe from greed, safe from the clipboard tyranny of one entitled Karen who thought she could rewrite history. Justice had taken its time, but when it came, it was complete. Just click subscribe and get more daily videos like this.